Thank you for rejoining us for part 2 of our conversation on pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and why that is an illusion. Even though this is being released a week later, we're recording part 1 and 2 on the same day. And during this little break we had a major milestone occur in the Reverend's household.
Yeah, so it's no secret that half the time I'm over here discreetly playing with finger bikes or with slime or building stuff and coloring with the baby Reverend right here at my side. Sometimes he's got his educational games that I know leak through on the audio. But yeah, during the break, we took an opportunity and I went back. I was like, well, hold on. The baby Reverend has ran off and is now quiet. Very suspiciously quiet. And I go in and lo and behold, the baby Reverend is buck naked, but very proud moment that he got his diaper off and used his little potty 100% by himself. So kind of a big moment in baby Reverend world. Just fun to share. And I was like, oh my gosh, so exciting. So I'm sure Tim got to hear a lot of that in the background. That was kind of broken up because my headset isn't quite that professional grade to handle being in another room. But yes, big moment for the baby Reverend, which is awesome because I just told him this morning that if he wants to sleep in big boy underwear, he's got to nail daytime potty training. And this kid is so smart. I don't put it past him to have fully put that together and understand, like, oh, I need to earn this. Okay. Because yeah, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but this baby is actually pretty stinking smart. Fun fact this week, he has learned how to rat me out. There's a funny side tangent to this. We were at the mall, and there's like an indoor play section. And that was another success because he had actually pulled me aside. He's like, hey, need to pee, go up escalator. Because not having a bathroom near a child's play area is so fucking stupid. I don't understand why the closest one is up an escalator, but I love that he remembered that we had to go up an escalator and he made it. And I was just so excited that I took him straight to the arcade to play his favorite motorcycle game and went to go leave to go to my car. Instant panic attack because I left my keys somewhere. Thankfully, because I do have Tile and I've played for that subscription, it did let me know on my watch. But because it's like, oh my gosh, is it the playground? Is it up in the bathroom? Like, where did it go? Because by the time it connected, I had already walked off and I'm like, oh, well, that depends on when the last time it pinged. But it was super funny because we got home, everybody got home, because this was a day that the Mr. Reverend was working from home. And like the first thing the baby Reverend says to the Mr. Reverend is, Zizi lost keys at mall. So I got to start being careful. No more sneaking bacon cheeseburgers in the car, right? Because he'll just tell on me. Not that I do that anymore. I've done that before, but not lately.
Wink. Yeah. Well, especially now.
Hey, I'm very open. If I'm going to get a burger out in the real world, it's going to be a real burger. And I am an absolute sucker for Wendy's bacon and cheeses. So.
Well, that ratting out will get old quick, but, congratulations to the baby Reverend on this milestone. We give him an huzzah.
Yes, his reward is he gets to run around in his underwear pants because what put us off on getting back to our recording was his refusal to want to put on clothes, as is natural toddler form.
Yeah, I want to be free.
I want to be naked.
What's wrong with that? But anyway, we are back, folks. This is Tim the Nerd, and as you hear, the Reverend Tracy is here as well. We are continuing our talk on the illusion of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. And we're going to start by talking about why we idolize billionaires and self-made entrepreneurs, because survivorship bias is a thing. It's essentially, history is written by the winners, right? There are plenty of examples of people who have started up a business and that business failed spectacularly that we don't necessarily talk about. I mean, depending on the level of spectacular failure, maybe we, maybe people have fun by bringing up some stories here and there, but there are more businesses that go out of business in a flame of glory than there are businesses or people that are, rich that are still talked about today. Again, history is written by the winners, and with survivorship bias being what it is, with it's the law of the jungle. People want to continue to worship the things that succeed, not realizing that not everything will succeed, you know?
Right. And yeah, the survivorship bias came up on my end of the research of a researcher called Abram Wald. And why it was studied was actually having to do with aircraft damage analysis. And the summary basically being that missing data, AKA failures, is critical to understanding outcomes. And this was more of the concept that I was teasing right at the end of last week's episode, is that success stories do kind of distort reality, because especially because of things like the self-serving bias, which I can get into, but it really kind of ties into things we were already talking about, in essence, that you want to attribute success to internal factors and fail to give those external factors ones. It also kind of applies to failures. You don't want to highlight the failure portion of something when there is so much success that you can focus on. So, yeah, like, but it is so important that if you want your reality to change, you have to look at the stuff that failed, and you have to look at the things that did help you that wasn't just in your control or your own autonomy.
Yeah, I mean, because like one thing I put down in my notes here was when the WWF, World Wrestling Federation, purchased World Championship Wrestling, their main competitor that was losing lots of money and all that. You know, this was a case, you know, now 25 years on, that, you know, history was written by the winners, because according to the WWE now, you know, they tried to make WCW look like it was this poorly run, always a poorly run place. They barely scraped by. They got lucky once, but they were lucky. They were lucky that the WWF came and bought them, when that was not the case. Because to your point, you know, for someone starting up like a wrestling company now, or you know, insert any type of business here, you can learn from companies that failed, you know, because, you know, in this case with the wrestling example, you know, World Championship Wrestling did do some great things along the way.
Mhm.
Granted, their mistakes piled up and ultimately caused them to go out of business, you know, at the end of the day. But there is nothing wrong with going back and looking at what did work for them, and see what you can do to, if you were trying to start a similar business, to you know, keep that success going, and then, you know, make different choices in terms of, you know, what didn't work, you know, if that makes sense. You know, it's like
Right.
studying the winners can teach you stuff, yes, but taking the time to find out, you know, why something didn't work can also help you out too, and can probably help you out more.
Right. Like, there is value in studying what didn't work, right? And I feel that that's more of like talking about that the aircraft thing, right? But yeah, why studying what didn't work matters? It reveals hidden assumptions, right? Success can hide weak logic because something worked for the wrong reasons, for example. Like, it could have been an anomaly that something worked. Just because something worked, it needs to be repeatable, right? Because that is what's going to determine, is it luck, is it timing, or was it support systems? And so, yeah. And so, by looking at it that way, it's actually a way you can self correct survivorship bias, because it's going to naturally, like, survivorship bias naturally focuses on winners, success stories, and, well, it worked for them. It worked for them, so it can work for me. Sorry, he got really excited. I busted out the slime, guys. But what we don't see is many similar attempts that failed. And I go back to the example that I gave of the pursuit of happiness, because he is not the only Black man that tried and tried and tried, right? He is not the only human that found themselves in a homeless situation and gave literally everything they could give and everything in their power to give, and failed at getting out of houselessness, right? Like, that's a very clear example to me of why survivorship bias, you need to challenge that. Not only so you don't get yourself in a situation where you're literally living off hopes and dreams of hitting it big one day, you're also protecting any bigotry that you are accidentally holding on to, because you got encouraged on this myth of, well, if they wanted out of homelessness, they could do it. because that's a funny example to me. Oh, you're homeless and want money? And I heard this attitude even as recently as living in New England about folks with their signs of needing help. It's like, well, anytime I see them holding a sign, I like to point out that there's signs on doors for help wanted. But the problem with that is the first thing you're going to fill out on an application is what, Tim? What's your address? And if you don't have one, that puts you almost immediately in a discard pile.
Or
So
even
no,
if
it is not just as easy as just get a job.
or even if you do have an address, because a lot of homeless shelters, do take that into account and allow people to use like the homeless shelter address as something they can do. But what if you don't have a phone, right?
Exactly. And that's like another thing that what are you supposed to do? How are they supposed to get in touch with you? And if you want to talk about it even more so, have you tried walking in and applying for a job lately, Tim? Because 9 times out of 10, people are being told that you need to apply online. And that's going to be a barrier. Granted, even if you can go to the library and do that, which, right, that's fair that you can go to a library and do that. What's funny is some library systems, you need to have an address to get a library card. Because if you live in a different area, there are sometimes libraries that you have to pay for access to them depending on where you live if you don't live in their area. I actually learned that about here too. There's like a whole Mid-Columbia library system that even though it's right here, because I live in Richland and the way Richland voted is a little bit different, I actually have to pay to join any of the Mid-Columbia libraries here. So it goes into, again, questioning survivorship bias, though, is how I learned these things. To go, yeah, that person, like, I might not give them cash, but I can try to give them like a bar or something on me because I just don't really ever have cash on me.
Yeah, and who does these days? I mean, everything, you can have all your money on your phone and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
to that point too, I mean, we can take a look at a couple of examples of people that are now billionaires that a lot of people idolize, that they don't necessarily have that self-made story that they want the general public to believe. One of them being Oprah Winfrey. Oprah has a legitimate past of living in poverty, suffering through abuse, and the fact that she was able to work through that to get to the point to where she is today is quite admirable and a very good thing. But she also, one, had a lot of good talent in terms of being on screen and all that stuff. Being in Chicago, one of the major media hubs in the country, didn't hurt her chances as well. She also briefly dated one Roger Ebert, from Siskel and Ebert. I'm sure there may be some young people who don't necessarily know who that is, but he was a major media figure at one point in time. And because, again, he dated her briefly, but they remained friends for the remainder of his days. But he put some word in and helped get her some of her first work, which does not negate the work that she did. She's done a lot of hard work to get to the point to where she did over the years, but other people helped along the way. And, another thing was geography. If she lived in Dothan, Alabama for the entirety of her life, would she have gotten to the point where she was at today? Probably not.
You said we could say that he gave her 2 thumbs up.
Uh,
For people that actually get that, like that used to matter before Rotten Tomatoes and all of the ways that you can review stuff now. But yes, that goes back to some of the concepts we talked about, that cumulative effect too, right? Like that's part of what gets people successful.
yes, another person we can talk about, Elon Musk. He does want to give this image that, I worked hard to do what I do. And I'm not trying to proclaim he doesn't work hard at what he does, but his family owned an emerald mine in apartheid South Africa. And people are surprised that he somehow, quote unquote, turned racist and everything. And his companies benefited enormously from government contracts and subsidies. Again, does that negate the work that he did put in? Because he did put in legitimate work. I'm not denying that. But he, if we want to use the race analogy, was put on the 80-meter line of a 100-meter yard race and then told to finish the race.
Right. And then another very famous example, and I know we don't want her to be an example of the cumulative effect, Dolly Parton. She is not an exception to this because it's all about those small advantages, no matter how they look. Because, yes, she was dirt poor. The story gets told. Small town girl makes it big. Pure talent plus grit equals superstardom. But what actually happened in the background makes her kind of a prime example of a different level of cumulative effect because she grew up in a musical family. That put her ahead. Also, in a church environment, in a culture where that mattered a lot, that put her ahead. She started actually performing young and was on local radio and TV as a kid. And that is had the early having of the Matthew effect that we had talked about. So I love Dolly Parton. Granted, she is a good one, right? She takes her millions and turns it into giving books to kids. But she is also a prime example of this.
Also, I mean, you can't say enough about Dolly. I mean, I will say this: like she wrote the song "I Will Always Love You," that for people in our generation was probably made more famous by Whitney Houston from the Bodyguard soundtrack. Now, the
Right.
residuals she gets from that, she donates all of the residuals to like black neighborhoods in Tennessee. And she doesn't have to do that because Whitney Houston's version, I believe, made more money than her version did. She could have just kept all that money, but she's paying it forward, and that is a beautiful thing right there. She's helping give other people opportunities by doing that, and that is a beautiful thing right there. If I got a chance to say something nice about her, I'm going to do it.
Oh, yes. Yes, exactly.
But again, to your point, it wasn't her alone doing the work, because you want to talk about like church, for instance, for a lot of communities, especially smaller rural communities, that is the way you do community outreach. That is the way you make your friends. That is the way you make your business partners. You meet them in church, you know.
Exactly. And it's like it goes to just show there's levels of it. Yes, being wealthy does seem to really put you at a huge advantage, but there are other ways that if you aren't wealthy, that you can try to take this knowledge and use it in different ways. Like it's not always accumulating money that gives you that boost and that ability to break generational cycles of being poorer, of a poorer demographic. There's other things you can flex, but it's still not going to be as easy as the pulling yourself up by your bootstraps makes it sound.
Yes, but we want to ask, why do people want to believe it? And I think you've already touched upon it in part one, at least, if not part two, is that it does give people a sense of control. They feel like that they are the one controlling the ship instead of being lucky that a certain wind was able to blow their ship in the certain direction that they wanted. It would be like, yeah, I mean, let's go with that analogy. It would be like a ship captain taking total credit for the ship getting to a particular spot, not taking into account, if they have a sailboat, that it was the sail, the wind blowing in the right direction, leading them. It wasn't the crewmen that were helping, the ship do all the ship stuff that ships do. Listen to me, I sound so articulate, people. Have you ever been on a ship, Tim? Not after the incident with my grandma, but different story.
That's a story for another time.
Well, it's quick. I'll tell you. We were. It was when I was a kid. We were in a lake. It was a little boat that had a small motor, and we were in the middle of the lake, but the motor ran out of gas. So we had to start paddling, and it was me, my sister, my uncle, and my grandma. My grandma at one point, was like, "I'm going to start paddling too." Now, at this point, she was a little on the heavier side in the middle of the lake, and she went to the right side of the boat, and it almost capsized.
Oh no.
Yeah, unfortunate, but at least we didn't fall into the water. That would have been bad. But I think that's one of the reasons why I don't like going in large bodies of water like that anymore.
That's a very good reason. Like almost tipping over would probably be a good reason to avoid boat travel.
Yes, yes, but Back to what we were talking about here. People want to believe it because it gives you a sense of control and it reinforces the image that there's fairness, right? If you've made it, the bootstrap narrative tells you that it was you, your grit, your intelligence, your sacrifice. If you acknowledging structural advantage can feel like it diminishes your own achievement, which I get that feeling, but I don't think they have to be two separate things. I think it is possible for somebody to recognize that people helped me along the way and my work helped get me there as well. Because, if you have dreams of, working in Hollywood, but you hang out in your home all day playing video games, you could have all the people in the world giving you advantages and all that. But if you don't take advantage of them and put in that work, you're not going to succeed, right?
Right. And this even has that connection to the just world hypothesis that we sort of like set the tone of this topic with. Believing the world is fair protects us from the terrifying thoughts, right? That bad things can happen to good, hardworking people for reasons completely outside of control. And therefore, if success is deserved, then so is failure. And that framework feels safer than randomness, even when data says otherwise. And this actually ties to a psychological term called cognitive dissonance. And we've probably heard this before, but it was meant to explain conflicting beliefs. And the summary on that is basically that people are going to adjust their beliefs to reduce discomfort. And that does explain minimizing structural advantages or even the cumulative advantage effect. Like, we don't want to say that so much outside of your actual control contributed to your success or failure because we want that comfort, right? Adjusting our beliefs in that way reduces the discomfort of, well, even if I try my hardest, even if I succeed, if I open my business and start making all of this money and I'm working for myself and I'm doing great, well, say some stupid drunk driver pops a curb and puts their car right through your storefront. That is something that does happen. That was not within your control. You couldn't have known that. Like, what are you going to do? Put up steel barriers so it can't happen? Well, how will your customers get in? They're going to drive right past your store. There's no amount of control that completely removes the possibility of a random ill effect ruining your plans. But we really like the comfort of believing that it is. And that's again where people can throw out facts because it supports that mental safe feeling. And that's what we're kind of driven to do.
Yeah, and people do want to shine a light on people like an Oprah Winfrey or an Elon Musk saying, well, they did it, but it kind of goes back to, many things we've talked about before about how just because you can find an anecdotal story that says something, that doesn't mean that that they're not the exception to the rule, right? Just because they were able to succeed doesn't mean that other people have the absolute same opportunities to get to that point as well and just are not taking advantage of it, right? There are structural frameworks in place that prevent a lot of people from even just getting to a point to where they're comfortable in life, have a small house, are able to raise their family, keep food in their belly, clothes on their back, and all that stuff, because not everybody has dreams of having 1,000 acres, having a mansion, having all kinds of money, like a Scrooge McDuck type of thing, right? Some people just want to be comfortable. And because of where they're at geographically or for whatever reason, they're not necessarily able to get that despite the fact that, they have, one, two, three different jobs to keep, keep themselves at least afloat. And to your point, even the people that we do find as successful today, if we're talking like your six-figure people, your seven-figure people in terms of their earning, if they get hit by a car, that could go away real quick in today's economy, because just because you have a six-figure salary doesn't mean you're still not living paycheck to paycheck.
Exactly. And even so, like, look at James Vanderbeek's family, right? Like, they did a whole GoFundMe and they caught immediate shit for that. But I don't think people understand how depleting medical intervention can be. Because if you don't think they didn't throw every dollar for him to survive because he had kids and because he wanted to live, to be fair, that happens. You know what I mean? But that still goes back to, we're going to try to seek emotional comfort over harsh reality. Our brains are simply built that way. People who did overcome genuine hardship tend to use their own experience as proof that the system works. And it's understandable and deeply human, but individual exceptions don't disprove structural patterns. Like, this is basically just another rewrite of the narrative identity theory, which I feel kind of ties into that self-serving bias, right? That we really want to say, I did it, right? I didn't have, like, it's all my personal agency. The help that I did get, if I do acknowledge it, was because I sought it. And that, like, need to believe that we have more control over things than we actually have, right?
Yeah, and going to the James Van Der Beek example, being that he was for most of his life, from his teens to sadly the day he passed away, he was involved in the Screen Actors Guild, SAG, a union. And, from my understanding, if you are a member of the Screen Actors Guild, the health insurance that they offer is pretty darn good. But it says something about our health system that he still found himself having to spend an exorbitant amount of money to survive for, as long as he did after he got the diagnosis that he did. And the fact that, his family now has to do that GoFundMe. It's not about him being a failure. It's about the system sucking at this particular time, even with the advantage that he had of a Screen Actors Guild card.
Right. And it goes back to, like, we have to take in real data. Because guess what? That experience of insurance not covering as much as they should probably rings true to a lot of us, right? Like, I even had it with my dental stuff recently. It was super funny to me that, like, I got told, like, hey, it's going to be this much. But then when insurance actually processed it, they decided to downgrade the coverage. I get no say in that, but I've paid for it. So see, and this is kind of that turnover of, there were probably some subsidies that helped back insurance doing what they were doing. I almost want to try to look this up in between things, because see, it's just, when we look at it as a golden thing, insurance was supposed to solve it, right? And it looked like it was working for a long time. So what got taken away? What got taken away that now, UHC, Cigna, all of them tend to do this, of where they're going to look at it and be like, but I want to keep my money. I know you paid for this, but we want to keep it. So what got taken away that they had to really start closing the purse strings on it? I don't know. But if we are experiencing it for us, it is foolish to believe, even though it's convenient to, it is very foolish to believe that other people don't experience that to an extent. That just because they have money, because James Van Der Beek, as much money as he may have had, is still not close to the 1% people.
Right. Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
nowhere near. So yes, it is actually realistic that they lost pretty much anything they had trying to fight a very aggressive form of cancer.
yeah. And it kind of ties in here too, when the bootstrap myth becomes harmful, because a lot of times people will start wanting to blame the individuals for systemic issues. I mean, like I mentioned with the James Van Der Beek thing, like, was he like on the level of like a Leonardo DiCaprio being able to get like $20 million for each film that he did? No, but I would, if I had to guess, I would say at his highest, he was probably making a solid low seven figures, maybe. Even if he had a high six figures, that's still a decent amount of money. But thanks to the systemic failure of our healthcare system, that went away. And that had nothing to do with him being a lazy person in any way, shape, or form. It was the system that we have in this place for our American healthcare system that completely failed him, and set him at the point to where now his family has to ask other people for help, and they should not be ashamed, be made to feel shame for having to do that to help keep him alive. I mean, how sick is that people are going to badmouth his family for trying to say, hey, because of this illness, because of the system in place, because of the money we had to spend, we need help now. we should
Yep.
be, and I'm not trying to promote his GoFundMe here, folks. If you want to give, great. If you don't, you don't. That's fine. That's on you. But like, his family should not be made to feel shame just because he was on Dawson's Creek, right?
Right? Like, really, what do you know him from anyway? Probably Dawson's Creek, and let's not pretend that that's like bankrolling in royalties to afford like 10 mega mansions and 30 boats, right? Like, that's not what he had.
Yeah, I mean, he would like if he was in full health, he would still be much more comfortable than I am financially. Let's put it that way. But even then, that shows that one small thing could lead to catastrophic consequences, and that has nothing to do with his work ethic. That has nothing to do with your work ethic at home. For the people that are listening to this, if you find yourself in some sort of financial strait because of something that happened, if you get cancer, it's not you being lazy. If you get hit by a car and you're not able to work for a month because you're rehabbing and then you're behind on bills or whatever, that's not you being lazy. I mean, you being lazy would just be if you decided you don't want to go to work because the new Call of Duty game came out and you want to play that for a couple weeks. That's on you.
Which I know that's a narrative that we really love to put out there, but that is not what most people's decisions are.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
I know that's a favorite, is that they're just lazy. Like, no, that's not a decision most people are making. They're not just actively choosing to be that
yeah,
way.
and to be clear, it's like Jon Stewart. I know back in the day when he would badmouth Fox News, he would point out like the times when Sean Hannity would find that one person on welfare who was abusing the system, and it's like Jon Stewart would point out, like, yeah, this guy, this one individual that you're pointing out is abusing the system and deserves all the ridicule in the world, but that doesn't mean everybody else on the system deserves that same consequence. Because
Right.
for like the welfare system being what it is, like, I don't have exact numbers, but the numbers of people that are abusing it on a national level are very small because most people need it. you know
Right. It's kind of the same thing of like voter fraud, right? Like, it's super, super small. But we want to have a whole, like, well, if this one person does it, then it's super bad, right? Like, the one example, right? It just gets flagged openly and taken as if it is super common. And it's talked about like it's common, but it turns out it's not really that common. And they're just trying to support a narrative that's self serving to themselves. Because it's like, see, look at this. This is this is an example. We tell you that this happens. And them over there are saying that it doesn't. They're not saying that it doesn't. They're saying it's not significant enough to take away the rights and the access to voting as like from the majority, right?
right.
Like, how about we just take out the rotten apple? Like, it's not quite the same as the one rotten apple or the few rotten apples spoils the bunch, right? It's kind of like, no, this doesn't actually justify chucking out the entire barrel of apples, though. So
Yeah,
same thing, but economically.
and like even with the voting example, like like when you rob a bank, the goal is to get lots of money. If you are voting, what is the reward if you vote illegally? Really, what is the benefit for you as a person for voting illegally? Nothing. Nothing.
Well, remember, the argument is those illegal voters are the ones voting to make sure illegal aliens have healthcare coverage
That they don't have.
wherever that came
you
from, that they don't
know.
really have. Like, my experience was, we pay for all sorts of stuff in the back end of the tax dollar, and I learned that when I worked in ambulance medical billing, because just because they don't have insurance doesn't mean that that doesn't have to be handled, right? Like, in some way or form, that we actually technically pay more as individuals for how our system is set up than if we just had a controlled socialized system. But that's a whole other side tangent that we can go into with how our medical thing is fucked up. I'm sure we can find an excuse to talk about that at some point.
Well, yeah, let's. I mean, we can kind of talk about that here because there is poverty stigma out there. A significant portion of people living in poverty in the United States are employed. They just are, often in multiple jobs. The bootstraps narrative doesn't just fail them intellectually, it actively blames them for a situation that working harder won't structurally fix. that is important here, because like if you don't have the advantages to be able to go to higher education or whatever, you're going to find yourself stuck in these lower paying jobs. And, with prices being exorbitant already, and thanks to reckless wars being waged for no real reason other than, hubris at this point, prices are going to be going up even further, and that is not their fault. They're having still to work harder to maintain what little they have. And yet, thanks to this myth out there, people are still being blamed because they're not somehow making it, or as we determine it in society, and like as we learned during the pandemic, like your 7-Eleven employees, your fast food employees get a lot of crap, and a lot, and yeah, individuals, you can have individual stories of like bad service at those restaurants. I'm not saying that there isn't bad service there, but that doesn't mean that the people there aren't working as hard as they can, because poverty is not really their fault.
Right. And it's like when you have majority of businesses in America being told you only have to pay this much per hour, and they're looking at the bottom, like how to make the dollar, right? So federal minimum wage is about $7.25 an hour right now. So if you're working a job that is only willing to pay you the minimum amount that they have to, and that goes back into they have their own shit going on that supports the quote unquote perceived need to pay that little. We'll have to get into it because, right, you've got like small businesses that's really all they can afford because of everything else they have to pay for. When you math that out full time, you're only making about 15,000 a year. And that's like about half under good circumstances of what you need to like in a survival range. Like they say that that's estimated between 21 to 36,000 a year. So if you're only making 15,000, and when that is considering either doing a small studio or a share of rent, because most places don't rent at 900 to 1,400 a month. That is paying a portion of maybe sharing a space with a roommate, especially nowadays, right? So that is very much part of it too. And that is something you have very little control over when those are your options for work, because you didn't have the ability to get a degree. As we look at it more and more, people are being blamed for having student loan debt, even though we had generations told that's what you do to not make 7.25 an hour. That's what you do to not make, oh my gosh, wait service wages or even lower. Go look that up for your state, because in Texas, I want to say it might still be in the $2 and change range.
Well, yeah,
So,
we did a whole episode on tipping culture.
yep, tipping culture. We did that because that gets updated far less often than the federal minimum wage, because I think it's easier to sweep under the rug of, well, they get tips. I'm like, well, but that's not really a fair way to do that. That's not ensuring that people can make a livable wage. That's ensuring that they can make a livable wage so long as the economic outcome and the current economic climate supports people being able to tip well. Because
And
I
it,
know there's that argument, if you can't go out, if you can't afford a good tip, don't go out. Well, then they're not spending money at the business either to keep the people working for the less than minimum wage. Like, you see where you can find flaws in this when you think about it for a minute? The thing is our psychology doesn't encourage that, right? It goes back to you have to understand what biases you have running in your head in order to question them, to see some of the bigger pictures of it's not just as simple as just get a job. It's not
that,
just as simple as manage your finances and how you're spending, because if you're making minimum wage, you shouldn't be able to do this, 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 or this.
and it's that resistance that can lead to people not wanting to support social programs, because if success is purely individual, then so is failure. And that
Right.
logic quietly dismantles the case for public schools, infrastructure support, healthcare, and social insurance like welfare. And it's something that is not politically neutral here. I mean, this is something that does affect everybody. It does ideological work that benefits those who are already at the top of the system. And what do I mean by that? Biggest example, Walmart. Walmart coming to town, they're going to get so many tax breaks, and then they're going to go and try to pay their employees as little as possible, depending on geography, of course. Like they could be forced to pay a little bit more, like some places $15 an hour. But then what you will find is that, those Walmarts won't necessarily hire too many full-time people, and those people will ultimately either have to find another job or go on public support and everything like that. When if we forced Walmart to pay a living wage to the people that work there, that do put their hard blood, sweat, and tears into that place to keep it running, then we could be looking at a different story here altogether. It's sickening to see a corporation out there, and I know this has been a few years since I've seen this. I don't think this is a recent thing, but it wouldn't shock me if it's still recent. But it was a Walmart store that had in the employee break room a sign stating that it's almost Thanksgiving. Please donate food for your fellow coworkers that need it.
Yes, and I thought it was funny that I know when we've talked about, I want to say we've talked about minimum wage before as well, and it came up that when you're working at McDonald's, they give you this little worksheet, and it does have in there like this idea that you probably have a second job. Right. I forget the details of it, but I just remember that hung out to me, that part of their advice involved in some of the training and decision making, that they just, we're going to offer this to help people economically, but it's going to point blank say that you need a second job.
Yeah. Which is part of the reason why I don't like going to fast food places anymore. I'm not totally staying away from them. I'm not saying that, but especially with prices being comparable to local restaurants anyway, I would just much rather go to a local restaurant and support a local business than go get an overpriced burger at McDonald's or something.
Yeah, overpriced and not cooked as well, probably. Granted, I'll still stand by my Wendy's bacon and cheese. Don't threaten that one for me.
but even Wendy's, quality wise, has kind of slipped down a scale compared to where they have been at least even 5 years ago.
Depends on where you're at, though. It really does depend. But the reason people make that choice, Tim, is because they're told if you can't tip, you don't deserve to go out. And so what it is it is technically cheaper, because you don't have that 15 to now expected 20%. That's been new. I was told that I've been not tipping as well because I guess they just want you to do like more 20% now. But yeah, like you're not having to add that on. It's less of a mystery expense. You know what you're spending when you go, and there's nothing about that experience that's going to change that. And if you think fast food doesn't take advantage of that by lowering their quality, you're wrong. Like, of course they do, because there's that business mindset that we're going to be fighting. If there's not policy to enforce it, they are going to do everything they can to make more money at the end of the day. And that means two things. That means they're going to pay people as little as they have to. And it means that their quality output is going to be as low as it can be and still get return people, because that's what's going to give the investors more money back, because that's what they want. It's not about serving people. It's about giving the investors more ability to hoard financial resource.
Yes, those evil people. Anyway.
Well, I'm just saying it is just a fact. It's a fact of the matter is that is what is rewarded in our system. And our brains, even at a business level, that's just how it works. We want resources. We view having resources as success. And when we are not implementing things to stop people from hoarding resources, you're going to have hungry, you're going to have poor, you're going to have homeless. Facts, just facts.
Yes, and I think that's a great time to start the wind down process for this episode and this topic here. At the end of the day, what we want to give you here is a balanced perspective if we can. What we are not saying is that hard work does not matter. Hard work does matter. You have to put the work in to at least get to the point to where you could potentially succeed at something. But what does success mean? Like for the podcast, we do put in a lot of hard work. Now, as far as listenership, it's not a big audience. We're the first to admit that. But the only way we could potentially get to a bigger audience is by putting the work in. And like local bands that play and play for years and years and years, that ultimately get discovered and become overnight sensations, it could theoretically happen to us. Now, having said that, if I walk out of this house today and get run over by a bus and that's it for the podcast, I still view this as a success myself. With other people, not necessarily, but it's how you view success that could be the issue. And I think, too, it's understanding that success is a team effort. It's about that teacher who, when you were young in acting school or whatever, helped you, stayed late to help you out, or, gave recommendations to people in the industry that they knew. It's the public library. You mentioned the public library. That is a resource that people can use to help better themselves in a lot of ways. It's the Pell Grant. Think of, people in my financial predicament. People are able to, at minimum, go to a community college and get an associate's degree thanks to something like the Pell Grant. Then with a Pell Grant, you don't necessarily have to rely upon loans depending on what you're going for. It's neighbors that help you out, the parent who sacrificed to help make sure you have an opportunity that you did not have before. Ultimately, we want to just, it's a team effort. It's a team effort. That's what we want
Yes.
to harp on here, folks. It's like, if you work hard and are a success and make a lot of money, that is great. Putting in that hard work is something you should do, but you cannot ignore the structural inequalities that a lot of people face in this country and in this world.
Exactly. And there's something I want to touch on, and maybe this can be a nerdy bit so that I can go into a little bit more. But there are researchers that have looked into scarcity and cognitive load. And basically, this got studied to try to understand decision making under scarcity. And the finding was that poverty does reduce cognitive bandwidth. So it challenges the idea that poverty is due to poor choices. It really kind of comes up as scarcity doesn't just change what you have, it changes how you think, decide, and function. Because when people don't have enough money, enough time, or enough stability, it doesn't just limit those resources, it limits your mental capacity to even figure out how to get more of those resources. And that's something that I think we love to distract from, right? Because your brain has a limited amount of cognitive load that it can take, a limited amount of attention, working memory, and decision making capacity. Like, you can actually think of it as like RAM on a computer. So if you're constantly worried about bills, if you're constantly, and even then, like if you're working 2 or 3 jobs, that takes a significant amount of cognitive load to do that alone. So it is a challenge to actually think about how to get out of a situation when you're currently surviving in a situation. And that's something that I think we like to pull away from and not include that in the understanding of how very much mental health and mental health care does exacerbate this situation.
And how, I think you did touch upon it too, but how that mental health situations can affect your physical health too. Because if you're worrying so much, it could lead to, maybe you want to calm that mental health issue by turning to alcohol. Or
Right.
it could just make it to where you get like hypertension and start getting heart issues or something like that. Even if you don't rely upon like a depressant or something like that to like not have to worry about bills for a day or something like that. Like poor people go through a lot, and again, there are some people that are poor that do deserve it. We're being honest here, but that's more the anecdotal side than what the numbers really show. Most people want a roof over their heads. Most people want food in their bellies. Most people want clothes on their back. And it's just, if we had a system in place that gave them as much of a shot as someone that lives in a rich neighborhood that has rich parents, then I think we all would be better off.
Exactly. We just need to look at the actual data and see how those problems actually do have a domino effect and affect our greater cultural economic stability. Because another one is housing instability. That is yet another one that we are super aware of it existing, but we don't want to give it the credit that it's due as far as how it affects these other things, how it affects somebody's ability to make decisions and have space, mental space and ability to make decisions. Because I guarantee if you're dealing with housing instability, you're probably dealing with other scarcities as well, right? Like that's probably not your only problem. So that's almost like the collective effect in the negative spiral, right? That if it can go, that you can have all of these small things stack up to make you more successful, you can have also these small things stack up to make you unsuccessful. And that's some of those concepts with scarcity and cognitive load and talking about housing instability and how that has a greater effect on our cultural economy.
Damn right, and a great way to close things for this week. Our 2-part journey on the illusion of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is over. Did you have any more thoughts for our friends at home?
No, just basically that ever message that we keep putting out there is if you are taught to blame or hate, question instead. That's all. If
Yes.
you were taught to blame anybody for where they are, as far as being impoverished or homeless or even a drug addict, maybe just take a pause and try to look at the data and understand that there are probably contributing forces to why that is. If something used to work and is hailed as a golden era concept, take a second, research what existed then that doesn't exist now. Because let me tell you, I didn't go into it, but I did pop it up in the background of, yes, of course, there were subsidies that helped medical insurance look very successful in the beginning that have been pulled back, or technological advances that have also happened that have made that not sustainable without subsidy. So question, ever question. Don't just get biases in your head and take the yummy, yummy, yummy permission to hate somebody and blame somebody because it feels good for you. Take that second and pause and question, because if we really want to fix our culture here, we have to all be a part of it, not just the ones that are directly feeling the negative effects. We all have to take part in it.
Yes, because it is proper. It is good for average citizens to demand that government, services do offer actual good and are not just throwing money away. But we can't let our own biases control control the logic there. Like if you think that poor people are lazy, like you're wrong, but you can't let something that simple kind of keep other people from just staying afloat if they can, right? It's like you can demand that things be run properly while still supporting those services. And I honestly, I think that is something that most people do believe in, even on the conservative side of things, right? It's like I don't think people want to see other people suffer, and they don't necessarily have an F them attitude. But I think, asking for accountability is not a bad thing, but we can't let this pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality keep people from at least getting somewhat level of a level playing field.
Exactly. And if you don't think the 1% who are very interested in continuing to hoard resources, if you don't think they know about these, or if you think they don't know about these biases and that they're not kind of continually using them to support the system that keeps them in a hoarding seat,
and you're not watching
personally,
the news.
I think you're wrong. I think these are the narratives they use. That is 100% how you can go, how do you keep voting against your interests? It is an understanding of this stuff because, yes, they do use psychology, neurology, and they understand this. They're not going to teach you about it because you not knowing about it is what makes it so damn effective.
Yep. On that note, each Monday, we'll have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
Goodbye, folks.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Bye, friends.